Hello. So today we will briefly go over the first chapter in Eric Foner's book, Give Me Living. I created a presentation and I hope to talk you through this chapter in about 10 to 15 minutes. We'll see if we can go a little longer or if we need to split this up into two videos. Hold on 1 second. We will find technical difficulties. Here we go. Here we go. Here, we're in business now. So, the first chapter deals with the exchange between indigenous Americans. When I say indigenous, I mean people native to the North and South America. So, indigenous Americans, Europeans, and Africans. Foner sets this chapter up to talk about how these people interacted with each other, both on the physical and the cultural exchange. And so as we move throughout the chapter, I want you all to think about if we never met one another, and if we haven't met one another physically, right, but virtually we have, if we met each other for the first time, beyond the sort of physical space that our bodies would take up, what sort of exchange would happen if we discussed our cultures? And that is what takes place in the New World when Europeans enter and meet indigenous Americans for the first time. Beyond the physical, which is the passing of disease and all of these other things, there's also a cultural exchange that happens that creates the modern world. And that is the same with Europeans in their interaction with Africans. When I say Africans, I mean people, continental Africans. And so Foner also reminds us of something very important that I always want you all to remember when we're discussing any group or population and using terms like European, Africans, indigenous. These groups are not monolithic. And what does monolithic mean? None of these groups are exactly the same, right? They represent a plethora of different people, and those people in that population have different religions, different languages, different cultural values. And so when Europeans arrived to the New World, when I say the New World, I mean North and South America. We should remember that both here and below us. When they arrive in the New World, the Europeans are coming into contact with a group of people they have never seen, right? They may have heard about them, which we'll get to, but they've never physically seen these sorts of things. They've never physically seen the differences in culture, but also the physical bodies of these people. And how Europeans respond to that is very important. Even when I say Europeans, we're going to talk about a couple of different Europeans. We're going to talk about the Spanish, the Portuguese, the English colonists that come in from the United Kingdom or England. And so even those groups of people are completely different. So how they colonize and how they interact with the people they meet is vastly different. I want you all to remember that, because there will be a great difference in how English colonists come to North America and how, let's say, the Portuguese come to South America. Got that? Eric Foner reminds us of that none of these groups are monolithic, including the indigenous population that is settled here in the New World before the Europeans arrive. The Europeans arrive in the early 14th century. And when they arrive, they run into, especially in North America, they run into a lot of different populations. They run into the mound builders of the Mississippi River Valley. They run into Western Indians who live in modern-day Mexico and California, and they also run into indigenous populations in Eastern North America. Now, although they are different, Foner points out they're populating different portions of North America and South America. They have one common characteristic, and that is their lives are deeply centered in religion. The religious ceremonies are often closely related to agriculture. We are talking about societies and populations that are extremely embedded in the outside world. And why is this? Because we also need to get rid of our modern day thinking, okay? In the 1400s and 1500s, there is no great Aldi's, there is no Safeway, no Giant, none of these places exist. Instead, our sustenance must come through the earth, right? We have to grow everything. It's not just cool to be a gardener like it is today. You have, in order to survive, you need to grow food. On top of that, there are all sorts of economic systems that are closely related to agriculture. And so because of that, indigenous populations are deeply grounded in the agricultural systems that surround them. The agricultural systems around them are tied to their religion, and religious ceremonies are often directly related to farming and hunting. Hunting is another thing that's really important. They use religion to serve their agricultural self-interest most of the time, and they look to religious practices in their lives hold some sort of authority, right? So they're not just some frivolous religion that they have. They look to their religion to ground their lives, much like Europeans. Europeans, and although they try to make it very different when they arrive, Europeans and indigenous Americans were not that dissimilar in their religious views. Although Europeans will think that, it is not the case. They both see religion as a centering power in their lives. So, when Europeans arrive, they come to and we'll talk about how they get here in a little while. As some of you may know, we have people like Christopher Columbus and John Smith. We'll talk about him later on. But these people come to the New World and they notice something, right? There are a couple of things that they're kind of like, okay, you guys are, we're here, we get off the boat, right? We have this long journey to get over, and I'm going to tell you straight up, Europeans who came to this country early on had a really long journey, whether it be the Portuguese, the Spanish, or the English colonists. It was not a Southwest flight. It was not a easy peasy flight. It was a very difficult, difficult trip. And so once they arrived, they were very happy to see land, but more importantly, this was a new place they'd never seen, right? And so when they arrive, there's this new actual physical space that they haven't seen, but they also run into these different things, or these people with these different things. One of the things that initially happens is that Europeans notice that they have some things in common with people, but they have some things that are totally different. One of them is their gender roles. So, Europeans notice that indigenous Americans often use, or often have, not use is the wrong word, but have women who work in the fields. This is nothing like they've seen before, because in European society, women have specified roles. It is not the case in many of the indigenous tribes. They have women who lead the house, both economically and physically. And so women are out in the fields working. Women are sent to hunt. Some of them, women are caring for kids, caretakers for children, but also leading the tribes in political ways. Europeans are generally confused by this. They're like, okay, wait a minute now. So y'all have women out in the fields working, and y'all have women taking on political roles. Pause. We don't know anything about that. That is completely different from what we are used to. And so that is one of the things that kind of off-puts them. Now, we would not be having this conversation if when Europeans saw these things, they would say like, oh, okay, no big deal. You're different than us. We can get into it though. People are different. It takes plenty of different people to make up the world, but that is not the case. Europeans see these differences as reasons that they should control indigenous people, right? And that is the issue. If I saw women out in the fields and I said, again, no big deal, women can work, I know they can work, you guys just do things a little different than us, it would be fine. But that is not the case. They immediately go into ways to convert indigenous Americans to their culture. One of the first differences they see is gender roles. The second is wealth. Now, before Europeans arrive in the New World, if I am a member of the Mound Builders of Mississippi, okay, I don't see wealth the same way the Europeans see wealth. And what I mean by that is this. Let's say that I have some potatoes. The potatoes are $5, or worth $5, right? I may not necessarily need the $5. I grow my potatoes, and I only grow enough potatoes to feed my family and possibly sell 1 pound for $5, and that's it. I'm not interested in amassing wealth. I'm not interested in gaining tons and tons of money. And so when Europeans arrive and they're like, okay, wait a minute. You said potatoes are worth $5 a pound, right? So how about we grow 65 pounds of potatoes? Indigenous Americans are like, whoa, 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 buddy. Straight up. I am not interested in doing that. I am only interested in making $5 and then using the rest of the potatoes to feed my family for the remainder of the year. This amassing of wealth is Europeans center their lives around this, in the New World and the Old World, getting as much wealth as possible, keeping it and being the richest. This is not the case in many indigenous communities, and when they arrive and kind of come to confront these sort of things, Europeans and indigenous Americans are on two different sides with this. We already talked about there are vastly different, well, not dissimilar actually, but Europeans consider Native American or indigenous American religions to be all sorts of things. They consider it to be almost they call them heathens. They're unclear about what is going on, and so these differences in religion really draw Europeans to try to convert as many indigenous Americans as possible. The last thing, we've talked about gender roles. They don't understand why women are out in the fields and why is this happening. Wealth, Europeans are interested in amassing wealth and indigenous Americans are not. Although they're not very dissimilar in religion, Europeans see Native Americans' religions as heathens. They see them as heathens. They don't understand why their religion is not founded in Western Christianity and all of these other things. And the final one is property rights. When Europeans arrive in the New World, they discover something, right? They discover this vast amount of land that has they discover a vast amount of land, but they don't see something very important around. They don't see a fence. So Europeans are like, here's the deal. We arrived here and we don't see separations of land here. We see one vast amount of land, and indigenous Americans respond by saying, indigenous people say, hey, here's the deal. We don't necessarily own the land here, right? The tribe owns the land, not one person owns the land. And so because of that, Europeans are like, that's not possible. You have to have land ownership. Land ownership is extremely important in places like in Spain and all of these other places. And so once they arrive into the New World and see that nobody outright owns the land, instead it's a communal space, they are off put by it, and they immediately go into ways to take the land from indigenous people, because there are no fences, physical fences, but also metaphorical fences. Nobody owns the land, no contracts or any of those things. Europeans believe that the land is up for the grab, right? They believe this land is actually, nobody owns it, even though it's communally owned and individually owned in many cases. Europeans believe that they can take it. When we go into the next slide, we'll talk about different ways that Europeans began to sort of, not conquer is the wrong word, and it's also a strong word that I don't like to use, but they begin to look at ways to control these indigenous spaces and again amass wealth and use the land. So I will see you the next slide.